First of all, thanks to Alex for inviting me over. I first got to know Alex from an email I sent asking to do an interview with him. As I will talk in a second, I used to be a DJ a very, very long time ago, but then things take a turn, and as it turns out, I'm better at writing words than music. So I thought, okay, let's exploit that and carry on as an academic. So a lot of the stuff I was doing is researching the history of turntablism and current practices, and of course, every time I was looking at things like synctablism or datablism or all the new type of turntablist communities that have emerged in the last few years, Sample Music Festival kept popping up. So I thought, okay, that sounds like an interesting guy, let's speak to him. So we'll talk more about what that paper I wrote with Alex's contribution on Sunday. Today we're going to talk about another system that I've been developing. But within that, it would be good to examine also some of the perceptions that the public has about DJing. And we're going to talk about in the panel afterwards whether DJs are musicians or not. So we're going to examine some of this, and we're going to examine some of the approaches I take in teaching DJ practice. So, as I said, a little bit about my past is for many years in the 2000s, I was playing wherever I could, some nightclubs, mostly illegal raves in the northwest of the United Kingdom. Of course, I was not paying any attention to my ears. And by about 2009, I had really bad tinnitus on the left ear, which is still there, and doctor said, okay, you either stop doing what you're doing, or you're gonna go deaf in a few years. And I thought, okay, let's go and do a master's then, instead of carrying on with this. But so I kind of left this whole DJing thing behind me, almost like, oh, it's something dark from my past that I don't want to have anything to do with. But during the pandemic, I saw there's an opportunity, actually. There's new technologies out, and actually I don't need to have the headphones incredibly loud so I can beat much manually. And so I started reconnecting with it, and I thought, you know what? Kids actually like that nowadays, so maybe something we can incorporate into the curriculum in Liverpool Hope University. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look, as I said, a little bit of musicianship in DJ performance. What's the public perceptions on that? We're going to look at some popular culture elements of it. And then we're going to look at a visual interface I've developed, which allows me to communicate what it is I'm doing during a DJ performance, with some limitations, which we'll cover as well. And then some feedback and evaluations that I had the chance to do with some of my students and some future developments. So starting off, we need to start about what a DJ is and everything with what I think is a perfectly reasonable question. What the fuck do DJs actually do? So some of you are laughing because you know who this is. The ones that are not, this is Madeline Argy, who released a TikTok in earlier last year asking what the hell is that DJs do. And of course, she was the subject of a lot of ridicule, a lot of nasty comments from people online, but actually a few quite well-known DJs got in touch and explained, well, this is what we do, and so on and so forth. Which, again, despite the ridicule, I think is a reasonable question, especially nowadays, what it is that we do. I'm going to show some videos later where we saw that in the analog era, there was a direct contact between the medium and the performer. Now we don't have that. A button, as Ray said earlier, can do one thing or can do a million things. And of course, we have the whole phenomenon of miming, of performers going on stage, paid a lot of money to just press play and then just pretend they're DJing, or even don't do that at all. So I'm just going to show a quick clip of someone which I think is a legendary personality, but also sometimes he gets it wrong.
I don't know which came first, shitty rave music or the drugs, okay? Like, did these guys come up, get their Macintosh computers out and hire DJ Fuckhead and get a drummer to come in and go, doo, 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 doo. Okay, thank you, you can leave. They've sampled it. Doo, 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 doo. Fuckhead, DJ Fuckhead. I have no talent, I have no talent. I play other people's records. My friends, there is nothing like going to a Euro music festival and hanging out with these like super self-important guys who carry suitcases of records. And what are you? I'm a musician, man. I'm a DJ. You're a fucking thief of music. You're a record player. You're a DJ turntable. You can take a Sam Cooke record, you can take Sam Cooke's Sweat and make it sound like something different because you go, Vicka, 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 Vicka. You can kiss my fucking ass, okay? Fuck, I guess I'm just an over-the-hill 40-year-old curmudgeon who's totally lost the plot, but I think that shit sucks. But anyway, So
obviously this is in the context of comedy, and with comedy we have to take the criticism as well as the wisdom behind it. So we can see why Rollins, someone who generally is respectful of music, and actually he's a DJ himself, he's got a radio show going on for many, many years, a weekly show. Why he thinks like that? Is it because he thinks DJs are not musicians? No, I think it's mostly to do with what he says here, that he hanged out with a lot of DJs in festivals. So there's another example from comedy, and again, we have to take it with, a pinch of salt, as they say in the UK.
There's more to house music than just playing music in your house. Whether you're trying to buy $9 pants at H&M or board a flight on Virgin America, DJs are everywhere. You know why everyone thinks they can DJ? Because everyone can. It's easy. Pat your head and rub your stomach. There, you're an amazing DJ. It's the only job where blatantly stealing content from the internet is required, besides mine. 90% of what DJs do is pretend to touch stuff. Stop acting like you're so busy. You're not hacking into the mainframe of the Pentagon. You're a professional iPod controller. You take two popular songs and mash them up into one god-awful 13-minute seizure starter.
Now, again, comedy, we have to take it in the context of comedy, but there is a truth in what Daniel is saying here. DJing is easy. And I know this might be controversial speaking in a room full of DJs, but DJing is easy with these new technologies. It doesn't mean a good DJ performance is easy, but actually mixing two songs together now is a lot easier than it was in the analog era. So let's go and have a look at some of these examples. So this has been something that academic writing has been quite busy with. This is a paper from 15 years ago, 2010. And how do you know he's not playing Pac-Man? And again, this is a stereotype that everyone has come across. Why are you checking your emails? Why do you have a laptop? And generally, this kind of hate of laptops from other DJs. And it's quite interesting, and if you see that the introduction of new technologies has always been met by resistance from those that are more traditional. And of course, this is not exclusive to DJ communities and culture. It happened when electric guitars came along. There was riots when Bob Dylan started adopting electric guitars. When playing pianos became a thing, all the pianists started thinking, oh, we're going to be out of job. This is not real music. And of course, when recorded music came along, it was a big riot from live musicians. And it's easy to forget that recording technology is just over about 120 years old now. And again, this is just an example from an interview response about, oh, I think DJing is easy with digital technologies. You just hit a button, it's all computerized, there's no skill involved. Now, anyone who's actually tried to use this in an interesting way knows that this is not the truth. But this is not about the truth, it's about perception. So, let's go on and look, and again, there's some examples as well from quite successful performers, such as Samuel Kerridge, which again is a little bit niche in the techno scene. But do we care about conveying what we do to the audience? And if we do care about that, does the audience care? And this is a question that a lot of performers are quite honest about. Maybe actually most of my audience does not care, but maybe the geek side do, and that's why I'm going to cater to them. Or there's another example from Primavera Festival, when they actually make a point that you might not understand half of what you see and hear by Ramon's successor, but that's just the fun of it. I'm not quite sure what fun we're talking about, but I think it's exactly the same as a guitarist seeing an interesting jazz performance and thinking, oh, what kind of chords are they playing? What kind of strings do they may have? So again, it's not for everyone, but there is definitely a section of the public that are interested in that. So just for anyone that is too young to have witnessed actual turntable performances, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about cueing a record manually, finding the position that you want. There's no cue points. You have to do it by your hand. And then you have to match the speeds by using the pitch controller. And of course, adjust the actual tone, the pitch of the music, which can further complicate things. But regardless of these limitations, and which seems very archaic compared to what we have nowadays, there was a direct connection. There was an ability, an opportunity for the audience to understand what is actually happening in the performance. You can understand and follow. And in the more kind of interactive arts field, we call this transparency. So there's a direct connection between performers' manual input and sonic consequence. Now, with digital coming along, this transparency is replaced by opacity, where we actually don't know what is happening. Let's just go and check something from someone that started off in the analog domain and embraced the digital, which is DJ Craze. So nobody in the right mind would turn around and say, oh, DJ Craze has no skills because he's using digital. Because, of course, this is a multi-awarded DMC champion and a very well-known personality in the field of turntablism. However, there are things here that are not, able to understand unless you have used a system like that before. For example, obviously the cue points, you can tell, okay, there's a new sound coming in. But then what does the flux button do when it actually holds, it allows you to scratch a section of a song, but then it will return to the position it was playing before, or later on we're going to see that he's using an auto-transform effect, which again has to be pressed by a button, and so on and so forth. So again, it is great, the creative potential that this technology allowed for turntablists and musicians. However, it also brought a veil between the performer and the audience and the musical output. So, to move on, going back really to some of the reasons I experienced in the early 2020. With the pandemic coming in, we saw a lot of streaming DJing. And obviously that was something that was happening long before that with things like Ruhe, and I think I'm pronouncing that correct, apologies to any German speakers, and Boiler Room and things like that. So it was a very well-established norm in electronic dance music and culture, streaming performances. With the pandemic and the restrictions it brought, there was a boom in that, in homemade ones. So this is DJ Shale, which amassed 100,000 subscribers within the matter of months. And is interesting to observe where is the focus of the performance. In this particular case, we're looking, the focus is actually on the performer rather than what the performer is doing. Other examples is things like, and this is a little bit later than the pandemic, we have this format, which is more typical Boiler Room format, where the experience of the viewer will be similar to the one being in the nightclub with the performer. So you can see a little bit of the equipment, but not quite as much. Then others, such as Johnny Rico, again, the focus is mostly on the visuals and the performer itself, and the visuals is a way to enhance the experience of the audience, something like that. But also we see a little bit of a gamification of the stream. So we have things that are very common for game streamers, such as memes or overlaid graphics, subscriber counts, and chat, and so on and so forth. And there's there's a better example from Ray that I presented earlier, where we have a connection of visuals, but also there is a very direct focus on the equipment itself, which again remains a very intrinsic point of interest for a lot of audiences. They're interested, most people watching a performance like that are interested in the music played, but also a lot of them are interested on what the performer is doing. And I've got this clip of him.
This is all fake and pre-recorded.
Yeah, so obviously this is sarcasm, but because someone on the chat mentioned that, oh, of course, you're not performing live, this is just miming, isn't it? But this focus on the instrument is a way for performers to almost prove themselves and say, no, this is what I'm doing, and there is virtuosity included in this. So then we had examples from people like Richie Houghton, which again, they don't need to prove to anyone their virtuosity, they've done that a very long time ago. Use some visuals with the focuses on the instrument, but not with the purpose really of communicating what it is that they're doing, but rather just to create a more interesting experience. And then now, there's another faction of streamers, which, as well as the equipment, that will also broadcast the software side of it, which is an interesting approach in trying to communicate what it is that you're doing. But there is an inherent problem in doing that. And the problem is the visual takes precedence over the audible. So, for example, anyone that's been to a club knows the feeling of a DJ start mixing in a song that you're familiar with, and the memory reflex that you're getting of it. Now, you can say that before it is actually audible. You can actually see, oh, this track is coming in, I know it or I don't know it. And the experience becomes more visual rather than audible, or at the very least, and there's nothing wrong with having an multidisciplinary experience or multi-format experience, but really, in my opinion anyway, in my teaching, the DJing practice, the audible should come first rather than any other visual aids. So, how do we tackle that? How do we fix this issue in the format of streaming? So, in looking for ideas for that, I came across datablism, which of course is something that Nicholas Caris came up with a few years ago, and which is a way of transcribing a performance, a DJ's performance, all the inputs. And in this case, we can see the movement of the record, and we can see also the movement of the crossfader in a software that I believe was also co-developed by Alex and another team. So, what I did is try to create something similar for more traditional DJ performances using Traktor. So let's go and have a look at what I've done. So this is overall my whole instrument. Is one of those S4s that we have here, a pair or sometimes three D2 controllers, which I heard as well someone said there's a representative of Native Instruments here, and if he's listening, please make a Mark II D2, please, because we absolutely need one. And Traktor 3. And now, what is interesting about Traktor 3 for me, or useful in this case, is that you can actually map out functions. So famously, this 4 cannot be mapped to any other software, but what you can do, you can use the Traktor software as an intermediary to transmit MIDI output. So what I've done with this is use another software, which I'm going to talk about in a second, to create a new graphical user interface for Traktor. So one of the problems with doing this with a less technical audience is they look at this and they're like, okay, I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, I can see the song moving around, but I don't know what these buttons are, I don't know what these do, and so on and so forth. So first thing I did is try to simplify the language. What do we have here? We have track information, title, labels, and so on. We have the live view, which is the waveform moving. We have a track timeline, which is the longer view of the waveform. We have recall location, which is the cue point, volume control, tone controls, and mixer effects. So with this, I rearrange it into this, a more compact view that it kind of gets rid of all the labels and all the information that can seem alienating to someone coming from a non-technical or have no experience background with this kind of software. So again, you can see the live view is actually coming from top to bottom now. Channel control, a sort of makeshift fader and EQ dials. The cue points are repositioned just underneath that, also just to mimic how they are arranged on the D2 or the S4. We have the mixer effects, and we have the track timeline and the information. And this is what the full interface looks like. And in my teaching and the occasional streaming that I do every now and again, I've got a camera looking down on the equipment so anyone can observe what are the actual inputs happening, and then you can see all the animations moving on top. So I'll just show a very quick demo. It's about 10 minutes, but we're not going to play the whole thing. I'll try to skip through it. So just so you can see what the animation looks like. It's okay.
Yes? Do you have a son named Robert? Robert Cook, age 17? Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Cook. You better come down to the station house. Your son is dead. Dead? How? He died of an overdose. Come down to the station house. Come down to the station house. Come down to the station house. Your son is dead. Mr. Cook? Yes? Your son is dead.
So you can see, most of the functions that I wish to communicate are being visible. So now you see this blue frame flashing here, which we're going to see again in a second. It means that a new track is loaded. Then we can see the faders moving according to the fader movements on the controller. Same thing with the dials. If an effect is active on each, if a channel effect is active, it will illuminate in this position here. Same thing with the other one. And any of the deck effects are used, this dial will also be moving. I'll just move it a little bit. And then we can see a green frame flashing here, which means this is in loop mode at the minute. And of course, both the effects and the loop mode will be depending on whether they're going to be visible or not from the fader. If the fader is up, then it will be visible. And the other thing you can see as well is that the track information won't appear until after a few seconds after a track has been established. So for example, I could cut a new track in and out, but then the information will not come up until I've left the fader open for 5 or 8 seconds or more, depending on which mode I'm using. So let me see if I can find one of these sections. There we go. So we have this middle track on deck B coming in. And the information will appear after a few seconds. So just to show a few, some of the ways that this was made possible. So the software I'm using to create this is called Isadora, and it's a wonderful software. It kind of combines the flexibility of Max MSP or Pure Data or these kind of platforms with a lot less swearing from me, because those other platforms are not for me. I had this conversation with Mathieu before. So this is allowing me to take essentially a live screenshot view of my screen, and then rearrange the different items, and as well have a camera input and to show the live view of what I'm doing on the controller. So, and this is on the left you can see the tractor section where all the functions that I want to communicate, I want them to be interactive with the animations, have a discrete MIDI CC number attached to them, and then Isadora can receive that through just a normal MIDI input port on a specific channel. And then, of course, I can go and say, okay, so this function is going to be tied to this particular CC number, and so on and so forth. So there's no conflicts between the different inputs. So we have functions like the volume and EQ, so all of it will arrive in this actor as Isadora calls all the different components. The screen capture will then become cropped, magnified, and placed depending on where I want on the interface. And then I will have one of them for the live view, for the waveform, one of them for the longer waveform with the cue points, and then another one for the track information, which is artist name or record label. Then this is the patch with the timings, which allows me to have the track information appear after a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's 5 seconds, which is when I'm doing a techno set, or if I'm doing something a little bit more open format, it will be more like 8 seconds, because I want to just leave a little bit more time in between. And depending on which mode I'm using, I can reveal artist and track name, so which it was in the demo video, or sometimes I'm playing something a little bit more niche, say like, some sort of Spanish underground techno, something like that. I would not actually reveal the name of the track. I will just reveal the name of the artist and the label it was released off. As a kind of invitation, well, I'm not going to tell you what track it is. Go and do your homework. Go and find it, and maybe you can find some more interesting music from that label or that artist. This is the array that controls the equalizer, and I was able to do a very simple hack that I found someone else did before me. And I'm using a 4-band EQ, where I'm using the gain dial on the S4 as a high input, and then the other 3 is mid-high, mid-low, and low frequencies. Then this is the hot cues, where essentially each of them are a blue block, and every time I'm pressing it on the controller to move to a different location, they will flash using a sort of LFO or wave generator, as Isadora called them, for about 3 seconds, just to notify that something happened there. And similarly, we have the mixer effects, where the S4 has 4 different mixer effects plus a filter, and they're all different colors when this is operating. And of course, this is global, so it will be affecting all four channels. And each time I'm selecting one, a different image will appear overlaid on the interface as to indicate which effect is active at each time. Then this is the channel effects view, which shows the overlay of the channel effects. So we have on the S4 mixer effects, or deck effects as it's called, and channel effects. And you can use up to 4, but I'm only using, actually 3 times 4. You can use as many as you want. But in this case, I'm keeping it simple. I'm using a phaser and a delay, and these are notified by an overlay on the track's waveform. So green for the phaser, which is on the right side of the screen, which makes a point because I'm using this controls to do one effect and this control. So the right side is green, the phaser, and the left side is the purple, which is the delay. And the buttons underneath that, they will also illuminate in corresponding colors, which again will show, will match what I'm doing on the controller. And again, these 2 frames I mentioned earlier, there's a blue frame and a green frame. The green frame indicates that a section of a track is looping. The blue frame will indicate that a new track has been loaded. And the only difference really with the blue frame is that it's the only one that on the waveform view which is not affected by the fader. So all the others, the effects and the looping, if I turn down the fader, they become, they're not visible. Whereas the blue one is always on just to indicate that a new track is being prepared. But you will hear it soon, but not quite yet. And again, just a very simple patch of camera view, which allows me to bring a webcam or something from a video capture card into and overlay it at the bottom. And the top one is the background, which contains just essentially a PNG image that contains all the non-interactive elements of the interface, which looks like this. And there goes and fill all this space with the different items which are moving according to the movements I'm performing on the controller. So this is really the whole interface and how we operate. And through the teaching, I had the chance to evaluate some of its efficacy with my students. And it was a fairly mixed group in terms of experience. Some of them had quite a lot of experience using Recordbox and Serato. None of them used Traktor, interestingly. It seems that's something just for older people. Some 4 had some experience, which they developed further this year, and 5 had no previous experience at all. So what I did with them, I played a video of the same performance, but one recorded the screen of Traktor's original interface with the overlay of the controller, and the second one, and then they viewed it again with the Isadora interface. And the idea was to compare the experience. What was the level of understanding you received from each different viewing? And this is some of the comments they came back with, that the dial visibility is definitely positive. It's very apparent what the changes are. And again, this is something we always struggle with when it's 20, 25 students around you. But you try to do that and so on, but of course they cannot see where exactly this is going. Whereas with the interface, it's very clear. Sequencer is also positive, and by the sequencer they meant the actual longer waveform. Knowing where the track is allows you to follow the mix. Volume fades of the waveform are most useful. Knowing which track is live during cuts is great. Cue points, they suggested it was not very obvious. I wasn't sure what these were at first, which again, that was mainly a comment coming from people that have never used the software before, but again, it's something I took on board. Graphics are blocky and unclear, which happens when you're zooming in into the interface, which is not particularly updated. Again, Native Instruments, if you're listening, please update Traktor. And the other comment that was interesting, I thought, and probably one of the biggest limitations is that they weren't able to look at both the decks and the graphics at the same time. So they will have to pay attention to one or the other. And again, one idea I had for a future development is actually overlaying the graphics over the camera image of the computer, or maybe do like a sort of quasi augmented reality thing in the future. If we get some funding, maybe. So this is some of the stuff we are working on at the minute. We are working on having individual track input, and actually instead of using Traktor's waveform, have our own visualization, either by spectral analysis or have a live oscilloscope. Just some visual representations of effects. So for example, a delay, maybe you can actually duplicate the image, a phaser, you can blur the image, or a reverb, something like that, which still working on. And some streaming information, so you can have, just like others have some chat, have some social accounts actually visible on the image. And eventually, really, the big dream for this is to move everything to open source. Because at the minute, we are tied by Traktor, we are tied by Isadora, which are definitely not free software. So we would like to use something like Pure Data, which is freely available, and then move for the visualizations, and then move the DJ interface to Mix, which is an open source DJ software. And this is all part of a project we call Off the Mainstream. I'm working with 3 students, 2 from music production, 1 from film and media production. And we are using essentially a studio space that no one was using at Liverpool Hope University, and we made it into our own DJ booth, and we are looking over the summer to prepare some live streamings there, and actually prepare the whole system so we can take it on location. And as we did earlier this year, where we live streamed a performance from, for a collective called BLC at the Visible Wind Factory, a quite legendary club of Liverpool. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. This is just some of information on literature that I found while developing this project. And yeah, any questions, you're more welcome to go for it. Thank you.